Welcome to the Recognise podcast. The Recognise podcast is a place where we share stories that make life meaningful, asking what it's really like to live in someone else's shoes. Today we have the wonderful Anna Mathur. Anna Mathur is a psychotherapist, podcaster, author, mum to 3, and is passionate about taking therapy beyond the therapy room. Anna is the warm, wise, and totally relatable voice behind the Therapy Edit podcast, now with over 3 million downloads. She is best-selling author of 4 books and truly has a knack for delivering those lightbulb moments. Often told through her own experiences, Anna has a unique approach to mental health, whether it's providing advice on anxiety, coping with overwhelm, or encouraging self-worth, and is also passionate about sharing her personal and professional experiences to support mums through motherhood. Before we jump in, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our Recognise podcast episodes. Anna, welcome to the Recognise podcast.
It's so lovely to be here.
Oh my gosh, such a joy. You were one of the
you.
first people actually to say yes.
Oh,
And
really?
because you do your outreach.
Yeah.
And you're like, will you come on my podcast? And this is our first series.
Yeah.
So we recorded 1 episode back in November. And then we kind of had said there's more episodes coming. And then beginning of the year, we're like, we need to make some more episodes. And then I did my outreach. You put yourself out there, don't you? And then you literally, I think within like 20 seconds of sending the email, were like, yes, I'm in. And just in classic your style, just totally underwritten with encouragement and support. And I like to start every anything we do at recognizing the person in front of me. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to recognize in you, I just think you're someone who is so intentional about connection and is such an encourager. And, encourage means to impart courage into people. And there are people, I think we all need people that impart courage into us in life. And for me also, I think professionally and what I do with Recognised and, we're all doing things every day where we're kind of stepping a bit out of our comfort zone. And I have honestly, a handful of women, and you're one of them, who I just feel like whenever I interact with, all you do is encourage and lift up and support. And I know you do that for so many people and you do that on your platforms, but I've experienced it firsthand every time. And, we were just talking about Happy Place Festival where you were speaking, we were doing stuff with Recognised, and you made the effort to come and say hello that day. And that made the biggest difference up in Manchester, away from home. And you're like,
we were
friendly
away.
face. And you just, you're an encourager. You bring such a light. You're so authentic. You're just beautiful inside and out. I think you're amazing.
Thank you.
So I love that you're here. Welcome.
What a gift. Thank you so much.
For those that don't know who you are, can you just share a bit about your story and what's been important to you in your life?
I think giving's always been really important to me. Just giving kindness and encouragement. I think we, our culture kind of can encourage us to be kind of gatekeepers of those things, as if we give them away, we're somehow kind of creating less space for ourselves, that kind of one-upmanship. And I think it's just really important for me to feel like I can be generous with that. My heart, really, I just kind of follow where I feel led with my work. I've always, right from when I was small, wanted to help in some way. So I remember I used to go around in a nurse's outfit. When I was little, I just wanted, my mum was a physio, she's always been a real generous giver and just so caring. So I think I've always wanted to be a helper of sorts. And that's what I knew. It was like, right, I'm going to be a nurse, because that's how you can look after people. And I did a psychology degree, and it took me off down the path of being a therapist. But I've always been, the friend that people speak to and, played that part. And I think the real powerful thing and the real challenge for me along the way has been to really recognise that I need that too.
Right, when you're giving and giving.
Yeah. And actually, I think my identity for so long was so rooted in being the giver that I found it excruciatingly uncomfortable to be the recipient of kindness, to be the recipient of support even. And I think when I was a child, my sister died of cancer when I was around 10. And I think one of my coping mechanisms was just to try and look after people, because I found it so hard seeing all the grief and the pain. And
you're an older sister.
And I was the older sister,
yeah.
you know, and I it was really hard seeing my parents so sad. So I think, you know, part of my love to give came from, actually, that was partly a coping mechanism, part of who that I am naturally. But I think, yes, the learning that I deserve and need to be on the receiving end of that has come in more recent years. So that's why I'm so passionate, not only about giving, but also encouraging other people, that the givers like me, you know, the mothers, the friends that are the go-tos, the helpers, the supporters, those who give so freely but actually find it really hard to allow others to kind of step in or to be vulnerable, or to say, hey, I need actually from you. So that's kind of, I think, underlines so much of my work is that recognition that we deserve love, and to have people walk alongside us. So yeah.
Wow. And what do you think gets in the way of, you know, why is it that, you know, the caregivers, the people who are always giving, like, what gets in the way of that? Like, why can't they receive? And that could be a whole podcast in itself.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a bullet answer.
Okay. I think our culture really applauds kind of self-sufficiency, because it's easy, right? And we are praised for that as children. You know, if you're the child that is the easy one, or you're the child that is the kind one, the nice one, the one that is less likely to be embroiled in some kind of argument over toys, you know, right from the beginning, I think we get praised for being good, and for being easy. And I think we can learn that is what the world wants, that actually is what relationships want, when in truth, you know, it's so much more nuanced than that. Like, it's so much messier than that. We all have needs. We all need each other. And I think we can just find ourselves feeling more comfortable and valid and valued in that role. And I think, it can often start as a coping mechanism for some reason in childhood. Maybe you're praised for that, or maybe there's a lot going on when you're a child, so you just kind of step into that role. But I think for that then to be your way of approaching the world, you know, it's really good to challenge that.
Yeah, totally. And okay, I'm going to pause there. We'll come back. Okay. We will come back to that. So you are a psychotherapist or therapist?
Yeah, psychotherapist.
Yeah, that's the term. And so you became a therapist.
Yes.
Psychotherapist.
Yeah,
psychotherapist.
I did.
And then how old were you when you became a psychotherapist? Because you trained for a long time, don't you?
Yeah, so I trained for a few years, and I must have been, I think it was kind of around when I got married, so it must have been like 2009, 2010. So I must have been, oh my gosh, I can't do the maths, you know, kind of.
Like 15 years ago or something. Yeah, great. Yeah,
I'm 40, so that have meant I'm nearly 40.
Yeah, so and then you've written books in that time.
Yeah, written books, had kids. Yeah.
Love it. And then you've also... When did you start doing your social media?
So I started doing that in about 8 years ago.
Okay.
8-9 years ago. And it wasn't at all in the context that I'm doing it now. So right now I share a lot about mental health. I like a lot of reframes, a lot of kind of psycho education. Whereas I started it because I was moving house into a new build. And I was like, I don't know how to make this white box of a house feel homely. So that's why I started Instagram.
Wow.
For inspiration for like paint and things like that.
And how different it is today. Although you still share like little bits of that. I love that. And before we get into your what's it likes, if someone was to live a day in your shoes, what would they find surprisingly easy and what would they find unexpectedly hard?
So I think what they would find surprisingly easy is that my day has like a really strong rhythm to it. So I've got 3 young children, you know, I'm working and, you know, I don't kind of have any, like my husband works very long hours. So normally he's gone in the morning before they're up and he's back when they're in bed. So there is a really strong rhythm to my day. So I think the kids are chaotic, but the way that I move through my day is kind of not.
Okay.
So I think that would feel quite surprising. It's like, oh, there's quite a lot of order here.
Yeah.
You know, things kind of move quite smoothly where I can control it. And then there's all the uncontrollables.
Until it all falls apart.
And someone kicks off.
Yeah, I've got one of my best friends. She says like her whole life, again, they're both full-time workers.
Yeah.
They got young kids. She says everything works until it doesn't, until like
Oh.
someone is ill or one of them is ill. And so, there's not that much margin for it to go wrong.
Very small to no margin.
Yeah. And what would people find unexpectedly hard?
So I think what they would find unexpectedly hard is parenting in a way that aligns with the values of kind of connection and just presence with 3 kids that are full on, and one of my kids is autistic, so that just brings a lot of kind of big emotions and a lot of like challenge with transition. So I think the enormous amount of energy, headspace and everything of me that it takes not to just completely join them in the meltdowns. Sometimes I completely and utterly fail at that, but I think it's that huge amount of resource to try and be calm in the face of anything but.
Right.
Yeah. That is probably the biggest challenge for me.
And do you think, obviously, I'm going to get into your first what's it like, because I think this is kind of connected. So your first what's it like is what's it like to be a therapist. And actually, do you know what was funny about your what's it likes is I could tell you're a therapist because everyone you sent was like the belief pattern behind the what's it like, if you like. So in brackets here it says someone who says I'm fine when you're absolutely not fine. And there was lots of other examples of that. And I think the theme I was seeing within it was basically, even though you're a therapist, you're still a human. You still struggle with perfectionism, with burnout, with all of these things. So I'd love you to talk a little bit into that, because I think that was the kind of underpinning for you of where that question, that what's it like was coming from.
I think what I've learned is the importance of vulnerability, is the importance of openness and honesty, and letting people see you in your messy, unfinished, untied up, like questioning state. And I think historically I've always been someone that, even when I started therapy, right, because as a therapist you have to have therapy, especially when you're training.
How many years do you have?
So I've now had kind of 10 to 15 years of therapy as a therapist. Bless her, same therapist.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have a question about that. When do you know you're done with your therapist? But we can come back to that. People want to know what it's like to be a therapist.
Yeah, but I think, even when I started therapy, it was very much, right, I was a very good client, right? I would sit there and I would say, this is the challenge I'm having. This is why I think I'm having it. And this is what I'm going to do about it.
I'm the same. Yeah.
And my therapist I remember her once saying, like, Anna, you literally leave no space for me. Like, there is no space for me. You come with your challenge and it's all wrapped up very neatly and placed there. And there's no way into it. There's nothing I can add, because you have come up with a solution and you've come up with a way forward and you've analysed it and it's all very neat.
Yeah.
And I just found it
There's a narrative. There's a narrative to the pain. Yeah. This is how we're going to spin it.
This is what I'm going to do about it. So don't worry about me.
Oh, yeah.
You just sit there and, sip away.
You're just here to listen to me sound good. Yeah.
And I think I just really had to learn that I needed people in the mess of it, not just when I had a solution, or not just in retrospect. And I think, I will say to some people that I'm fine when I'm not. And I think I used to feel really challenged that was inauthentic. But actually, as I have learnt more about vulnerability, I've learned that actually you don't need to tell everyone everything.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that there are kind of 2 or 3 people in your life who really know you and really see you. And so, I think I went through this big stage of kind of not being vulnerable at all, or at least only in a very comfortable way, to then kind of swinging to the other point of like, to be authentic, I have to tell everyone everything.
Which is exhausting.
Which is just exhausting.
And not fair on the people around you.
Not necessarily fair on them. And it's all just a bit kind of like throwing it out on the table and thinking this is what vulnerability looks like. Whereas now, there will absolutely be times that I walk, having dropped off my kids and having an excruciatingly difficult morning, and I will just kind of smile and nod at some of the mums, and I will get in the car and I will just burst into tears and I will call my mum or I'll call a friend. So I think, it's having this wisdom to know who those people are, and actually then you have more capacity to go deeper with them. And I think authenticity and vulnerability done well doesn't need to look like telling everyone everything. It's like, who are those people that I feel safe with? Who are those people that will give me wise and warm advice and will be honest with me and maybe gently challenging sometimes? So sometimes, yeah, I do say I'm fine when actually I'm not.
Yeah.
But I'm learning that actually that doesn't need to be fake. That's just actually sometimes being wise.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting because you give yourself such a hard time, don't you? When you feel like, well, one of my biggest values is being authentic. So when people ask me how I am, even though it's kind of I often feel like the how are you is such a token.
Yeah.
We don't like that question, really. It's just a difficult question,
Yes.
isn't it? No one ever really answers.
How much do you want me to answer
honestly,
this?
And it's like, are we just walking by each other? Like, is this... Anyway, we all know that question. But because being authentic is such an important thing to me, when someone does ask me how I am, and I know that internally, there's all this stuff going on, I do find that hard to not kind of go into it. But then I also have definitely experienced those times where I have gone into it and it hasn't been with the right person, and they've not been able to validate, and they've not been able to give me what I need because it's not their place to give it. And I think what you're saying is it's about discerning the right moments. And I had an experience actually with Abby, who's in the room. She's over there. And Abby, it was like just before Christmas. You might remember this, but I was in the office, and with those days where the tears just they're here, they're just ready to go. But I think again, in the workplace, how do you do vulnerability well in the workplace? I know Brené Brown talks so much about that, and it's so good. But I often feel like, obviously, when you're leading a team, when you're leading people, you kind of don't. It's important to be vulnerable and authentic. They don't need to deal with your crap, the lot. But Abby and I have worked together for a long time. We never really know how to describe our relationship because it's not really a normal work relationship. And she came in and was like, how are you doing or something? And I think I was heading home, and I was like, yeah, fine. And I walked down the corridor, and I just caught myself, and I said to myself, go back and be honest, go back and be real and feel the moment. Because that was important for me, because I think often I am just sucking it up, and there's a cost to that as well.
Absolutely.
And in that moment, I wasn't being authentic with someone that I could really open up to. And so I went back and I just said, actually, I've completely just lied there. I'm not okay.
I lied.
Out came the tears. And it was such a powerful moment, and such a moment of connection, such a trust building space. And so, I think it really is about discerning the right moments, and you're going to get it wrong, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get it right, like I did with Abby. And other times that would be totally inappropriate.
No, I hear you. Absolutely. And I think we have never been connected to so many people in all the generations before us. We think about the fact that we're still, Facebook friends with people that we haven't seen for years. There's we've never been so connected, but I think in so many ways we've never been so disconnected. We have a set amount of emotional, social energy, right? And I think with all the WhatsApps and with all the Instagram messages and all the emails and all the quick chats with all the people, I think what we're doing is we're kind of constantly spending a little bit of that social energy. Yeah. So when someone who really loves us and cares about us, that we feel safe with, says, how are you? We just do not have the capacity to really go there. So I think sometimes, it's actually thinking, where is it wise to be putting all my energy? Can I actually maybe pull back on some of these connections so that I do have that capacity to go deeper and invest in more depth in a way that is actually really a soul meeting a soul? Because it takes energy to do that, right? So I think, it's just recognizing that we have limited social capacity. At the end of the day, we have limited amounts of any kind of resource, mental, social. And I think it's recognizing that we spend it, on a more kind of, we're really thinly spread. So maybe sometimes we need to say we're okay, and then just turn and just connect with someone who really sees us and can speak into that and be with us. You
talk about in your self-worth book about cheap fillers.
Yeah.
And what do you call it? It's like cheap.
Like the quick fixes.
And I've been thinking about, So can you just explain that a little bit?
So I think often we kind of grab those things that make us feel better in the minute, that give us a sense of worth and make us feel seen in the moment. It might be, it might be social media kind of validation. You put something out there, you get a really quick response and you think, oh, that was good. I feel validated by that. And really, when we just have loads of those, it's so surface level. And I think sometimes we have this such a deeper need to feel really seen, just like you did in the corridor at work. To feel like someone is with us, to feel like someone is seeing some of those kind of messy, unfinished, painful parts of us. And I just don't think we could get the quality of that connection from so many of the places we look for it in.
Yeah. And I think when I read that chapter in your book, I think you described it as the difference between having like fast food and having like a long dinner with friends that's like healthy food. And I've been really thinking about that a lot recently. Even when I go to pick something up to eat, is this, or buying something quickly online, is this just a quick fix to make myself feel seen and feel better about myself, as opposed to actually leaning into the long call with someone that I'm really close with, or the dinner, the face-to-face interaction. So I think, I really recognize that need to look at those, look at those things in your life and go, that's actually like a quick fix for me. I think you used the word nourishing. Like, what's nourishing?
Like nourishing your soul, nourishing, because we've never been so connected, but as a culture, we've never been so lonely.
Yeah.
So something's not adding up here. And I've got a friend who's going through a lot at the moment. Her dad recently passed away. And, for years, we WhatsApp loads, back and forth. And there's definitely a place for that. But, more recently, I felt like actually we need to do less of this and more of the coffee on the sofa.
Yeah.
Even if it's fewer and further between, or even just, let's schedule in a time to have a phone call and we both go for a walk in our respective, like where we live, and we talk intentionally on the phone. And I think it's that there's so much that is so quick and easy to do that kind of like hits a spot for a moment, and it's so accessible that's often what we go for, the quick WhatsApp over that actually let's have a chat and make space for this. But if we're really honest with ourselves, it's those more intentional connections and those more intentional ways of kind of, those are the things that feel nourishing. Those are the things that kind of meet that deeper need.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you must see this so much with your clients as well, obviously. So how many days a week do you see clients? Are you doing it all the time?
So at the minute I see 6 clients over 2 days, but normally they just kind of like end up dotted around the week.
Okay. Yeah. And what's the coming back to that, what's it like to be a therapist? What's the best and worst thing about it?
The best thing is seeing change. The best thing is seeing people have these light bulb moments that just, it's the challenging of that critical internal narrative. It might be that actually you had a bullying teacher or a really critical parent, and that just became part of how you speak to yourself, because we internalize these things as kids. We look to adults to tell us, are we good? Are we deserving of love? And actually, often we find, we get the message that we have to be this way, or we have to do that. And we internalize that. And that's kind of then how we move through life. And that can lead to burnout, and striving, and maybe even ending up doing a job that actually was not even really something you wanted to do. It was something that your uncle wanted you to do. And so, just seeing people start questioning and challenging these narratives that have had them believing that they're only worthy of love and good things if they are a certain way. And it's just amazing, because people just start living more in line with who they were created to be.
Wow. And in freedom and more freely.
Yeah. And it's wonderful. That's wonderful. The hard thing.
Yeah.
The hard thing, I think, is that, in this world of self-help where, I write self-help books, so I am fully a part of that. Therapy isn't accessible for everyone, so I love putting things out there that give them some insight. But I think in this world of quick fixes and self-help, people come knowing a lot about themselves.
Okay.
You know, people come a little bit like I did to my therapist all those years ago.
I'm
like,
totally guilty
I know
of
everything.
this.
Yeah. I know everything about, I know why I am the way that I am. So, but I know that I need some help. But actually, I'm quite self-sufficient. So I need you to help me, but I don't really know tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Tell me something about myself that I don't already know. And it's this sense that actually these days, I think it's harder for people to understand that there is such therapeutic value in just being heard. That there is such therapeutic value.
Say that again, because that was just gold. Please just say that again.
There is such therapeutic value in just being heard. There is such therapeutic value in sitting with someone or being with someone, sometimes on the phone, sometimes over Zoom, and sharing some of the maybe darkest times or worst thoughts or trickiest feelings that you have. And that other person, you know, maybe you've expected all your life that if you would share this about yourself, that other person would get up and walk away. And maybe that has happened. You know, maybe you've taken a risk to be vulnerable and someone wasn't able to give you what you need. So the therapeutic value in having someone hear your story and just and hold that space and be warm and kind and maybe even loving, you know, that's how we can perceive it in a way that other people haven't been able to. It finds people thinking, well, maybe, just maybe I might share this with someone else. Maybe I'm not as bad or broken as I thought. You know, there's real value in that, but it's really hard sometimes to get people to trust that talking is really, really valuable.
And do you think that's because we live in a society that is sort of like, just stop talking about it and get on with it? You know, talking about it's not going to solve anything. I think that's quite an old generational, I don't know what you call it, like stereotype, isn't it?
Yeah.
This idea that just stop talking about your problems. That is something I think people do come into therapy with.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
It's like, how long can you talk about the same thing?
Yeah. And what's the point? Like, we can't go back and change what happened to me. So what's the point in talking about it? But and also in this culture now of like 5 steps to this, 3 steps to that, 30 days to that. It's like, right, come on then. I'm going to do 4 sessions with you. Yeah. What can you do?
Oh, but you are really touching on something I think so many people must experience with therapy, because I've been on the you're the therapist. I've been on the receiving end. I've just finished a year of therapy, and I found it so hard for so many of the reasons that you're saying. One of the reasons was I'm an incredibly self-aware person, so I'd come in like this is everything I already know. I'd kind of self-diagnose myself, and I would end up saying to my therapist, you're just going to find me really annoying because I'm telling you I think I've got all these things. And she kind of would just say nothing, which would wind me up more. But the other thing was, I'm someone who likes to get things done. And so I would kind of be like, why is this still hard? Why am I not seeing the progress in this yet? And that kind of, I guess we live in a fix it culture. Everything needs to be fixed. And I think what you just said about being heard is so important, is because it just speaks to just that like raw human emotion, just to be seen and heard. And sometimes, you know, in whatever we're going through, whether you're a therapist or not a therapist, you just need someone to come and sit alongside you, don't you? You don't. I think some of the more painful things is when someone's trying to sit there, offer you like 10 solutions as to what might help.
Yeah.
When you're like, oh no, you're just missing it. You're trying all the best, but you're getting it wrong. Just sit and listen. I don't actually need you to do anything. I just need you to listen to me.
Yeah. And actually we know that some of those most powerful moments of connection is when we feel seen.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, there's this idea now that stuff should feel easy. That we should feel finished, that we should do these things and then we will come through and out the other side and we will feel better. But, you know, I just think we will never be we'll never be finished. You know, we will always be unfinished. Like we just constantly moving through challenges and different curveballs. And I think it's part of the challenge is that we are wanting to get to this place where we feel completely complete. And I don't think in this lifetime we ever really will. We can find peace and an acceptance in the unfinished nature and the messiness that we will always be. We will always be messy.
But
we will always be unfinished.
A burden off for people. If people are listening, well, they are listening, but for the people that are listening, it's such a burden, like released to be able to say you're incomplete. And you always say you're actually not enough, which I found really funny because we have a "you're enough" pop on.
I know, but it's
So
about
like, Anna, can you not say this, please? But you're also never going to be enough because you're not perfect. You're incomplete. And oh my gosh, what a relief for us all.
Yeah.
It's so
like
good.
You are enough in your complete not enough-ness.
Wow. Okay.
Like, we are enough, and we have to be enough. Otherwise, we will always be striving. We will always be pushing. We will always be reaching. And there's nothing wrong with doing that and striving and reaching. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But when you're doing it to feel completely enough and completely like whole, like you never will. You're never going to be enough for the world's standards. You're never going to be enough for the expectations of people around you necessarily, or some of the standards that you set for yourself, and I think actually, as someone who has strived and been so like furiously perfectionist, just desperately trying to earn this sense of enoughness, like it has been the most freeing, wonderful thing to recognize that I will never be enough for my standards, for the standards of people around me, but I am enough in that not enoughness. Like that is all I can be. It's great to want to grow. It's great to want to work on things. But when we're doing all of that in the hopes that we will feel finished and we will feel done and we will feel tied up and life will feel easy, that's just never gonna come in this lifetime.
Yeah. If I could just get that promotion, if I could just get my skin to look like this, because we've never been more surrounded by knowledge as well and information, and it's just information overload. There's a million ways that I didn't even know I could make myself look better or feel better. I'm like, okay, I need an LED mask now for my face, and I need this, and it's actually overwhelming. But the picture that came to mind when you were speaking is something that I kind of worked through in therapy, was this idea that basically I had my 30th birthday last year, and I had obviously all my closest friends and family around me basically saying the nicest things to me all weekend. And I'm a words of affirmation girl, so I was just like lapping it up. But by the end of the weekend, I felt empty. And it was almost like people had been pouring these words into me. I'd be reading all these cards and they just weren't landing. And I'm someone so in touch with my feelings. I was like, I know you're saying these nice things, but I still feel empty. I still feel disconnected. Why am I feeling like this? And something I worked on was this realizing there isn't this like base level like floor, if you like, to my bucket that says I am enough, I have value. So when other people try and pour it in, there's just like a hole in it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just a helpful picture for people, is if you're feeling maybe how I felt, is that maybe look at that floor of your bucket. Like, is there a good foundation? Because if you have that, only then can anyone else fill up the bucket. Otherwise it's just always going to be like pouring in and out.
So powerful.
But okay, I'm glad you think
that's so
you're
powerful.
You're the therapist,
and it's
I wholeheartedly disagree.
On that. I think I absolutely love that, and I think that's right. In one way, I'm saying you're not enough, and that's because you're never going to be finished. So if that's what enough means to you, like you're not enough.
Yeah.
You are not enough. But if you can fundamentally believe that in and of yourself you have worth and value, that has to be enough. Like, it's not about whether you feel you have value. It's not about whether someone's told you have value. It is this fundamental fact: I have value. End of story. Regardless of how I feel, regardless,
it's not up for an opinion. It's not up for a question,
it's not
a
up for
debate. Yeah.
It's not subjective. It doesn't,
So good.
I remember my first book came out and it was in the pandemic, and I cried, not happy tears. Like you were saying at the end of your birthday weekend, I honestly thought that I would feel valid. I honestly thought that having these words out in the world, I'd feel like a massive box tick, like, oh, I feel like a real author. I feel like I've done something really good. And I got lovely words, and the kids made me cards, and there was cake. And
got the photo,
and I cried because actually I thought I'd get somewhere and feel something that I didn't. And again, it was this other onion layer of peeling back of that sense that, Anna, your worth isn't up for debate. It's not changed by what you do. And I think that was so powerful because, if we're going to work on not taking everything to heart. If someone criticizes, if someone looks at us funny in the street, if we are going to work on that not having power over us, we also need to work on praise and, all those external, it's lovely to hear, but it doesn't change anything for me. I could have 10 books out in the world. I could have no books out in the world. My worth is the same. And it's hard because the whole economy is fueled and runs on needing us to think that we have to be more, have more, that we're missing something. The LED mask, this qualification. And I remember listening to Robbie Williams on a podcast with Fern Cotton on A Happy Place. And he said, I got to the top of the mountain of my career. He said, I sold more albums than anyone else had ever sold. And he said, and I still didn't want to be here. And he said, and it was this startling, harsh realization that he'd got there. And it didn't give the value. Yeah. It can only come from that. Yeah. Standing in that truth. Only.
Yeah. And I think so many other like famous people, super successful people have also said like a similar story. And it's so, it's massive when you really think about what those words mean and where it comes from. And the idea of being recognised, obviously it recognised for us, it comes from this place that, as we've just been talking about, every single person has inherent value, and that's what it's about. And I always really, sometimes I think because of the word recognition, recognise, people think, oh, it's about being recognised and like being, well, it is about being seen and it is about giving recognition to others, but it's not. In our world, we mistake that recognition for like recognizing people for their accomplishments. And I think there's like 9.2 billion search results for like employee recognition in the workplace. And something we're really trying to change it recognizes this idea that no, like that is important. Yes, we celebrate our friends. We like lift up people doing incredible things in our lives, whether that's raising their kids or writing a book, whatever it is, we celebrate those things. But before you do any of that, you actually just need to recognize people for who they are, and not only just who they are, what they've been through, because that's also what makes them who they are. And like all of our experiences and what make us so nuanced. And it's just so important to me because I think we both strongly believe people have inherent value. Yeah. And I think when you start from that place, you can recognize people more fully than just because of what they do. Yeah. And the same goes for ourselves. That it has to start there, it's ultimately. So true. So true. Oh my gosh, this is so good. Just taking a little pause to tell you about Recognised, who brings you the Recognise What's It Like podcast. At Recognise, we give recognition to individuals, charities and causes to raise awareness, spark conversations and bring solidarity. Our award-winning jewellery brand creates beautiful jewellery that supports powerful causes, and 100% of profits from our iconic statement pop-ons are donated to our partner charities. Head to recognisestore.com to find out more and use the code ANNA to get 15% off your purchase. Thank you for being here.
No, I'm loving it. It's such a privilege.
Your second what's it like is, what's it like to experience burnout, even when you know all the strategies to avoid it? Yeah. So this really nicely flows from obviously being a therapist, because I was actually going to ask you, but I didn't for time, like obviously you're a therapist, so you know everything.
Know loads of stuff.
So then how do you switch off? How do you deal with burnout yourself? How do you deal with perfectionism? That's so interesting that's kind of what you said, was even when you know all the strategies. Yeah. Let's start with, what is burnout? What's it looked like for you?
Burnout is quite simply when you've pushed beyond, either because you've had to or because you are just wired that way, and maybe it's perfectionism, people pleasing that come into play, or a mixture of all of the above. You have to push beyond the limits of your resources so consistently that your body just says no more. And I would say my burnout, I've had a couple, because I think once you've been burnt out once, it actually takes a long time to recover, and it normally requires significant lifestyle change. Putting boundaries in maybe where they weren't, valuing rest in a way that actually perhaps you used to see it as a bit of an inconvenience and something that you did in the short hours you were in bed. And about slowing down and living more intentionally and slowly. And, burnout for me was the most humbling thing that has happened to me, because it was post-pandemic where, it's kind of like just being so switched on, homeschooling, all of these things that was going on. But also on top of that, perfectionism, people pleasing, that those kind of like internally driven ways that find you kind of pushing beyond those times when actually you've got nothing to give, but you keep giving anyway, because that's just what you do. And I crashed mentally, physically. I couldn't do anything. You know what? It was literally like, the way I explain it is like having your skin removed, so that you had no buffer against the world. Like every noise felt too loud. Every question that came my way just felt overwhelming. My husband would say, "What do you want for dinner?" And I would have like literally be in a state of panic. Like
you've been in decision fatigue.
There was literally nothing. All I wanted to do was lie on the sofa and stare at the back of the sofa, backwards on the sofa, not even looking at the TV. I couldn't find joy, because that takes energy. It takes energy to relax. It takes energy to ease into like connection and relationship. And I just couldn't do any of that at all. And it was just so incredibly humbling, because I was someone who always did, and suddenly I couldn't do anymore. And I had to, reassess boundaries. I had to reassess how much I was working, what I was striving for, what was important, how many people I was connected with, and it changed my life. And I wouldn't go back. But I now am so passionate about helping people recognize and respect rest, think about where their boundaries are. How do you hold a boundary? Where might they need to be? And looking at lifestyle, people pleasing, all of those things.
And so when you say the word boundary,
yes,
what do you mean?
Right. So I think
like, what is a boundary?
So I think I
do know what a boundary
you know what they are, but basically they are kind of like invisible. These invisible kind of values and like almost rules that we have that help protect our values and the things that are important to us. And they can be really fixed. I will not let someone treat me in a certain way, right? If they do, I will say, this isn't acceptable to me. Like, say, I don't know. I think we can all think of situations in which someone kind of maybe really encroaches on personal space or doesn't take no for an answer. So it's like, what are those fixed boundaries that are actually really, really fundamentally value driven? And then what are those more flexible ones? Like, I don't work on the weekend. Well, actually, every now and again, something comes along and I think that'd be wonderful. Like, maybe I could take my family. So that's more of a flexible boundary. Yeah. And then, it's just recognizing, how are we protecting and allowing ourselves to live out and live in line with the values that we hold. And we all know when the boundary has been crossed, right? Because we get that feeling, we feel uncomfortable, we feel maybe resentful or cross. So it's actually finding ways to honor those boundaries and maybe speak out and ask for something, or ask to be respected, or be able to say to someone, you know what, actually, when you joke about that, like it actually makes me feel quite uncomfortable. And that can be really hard to say if you're historically a people pleaser. But Or saying to someone, instead of just saying, oh, I can't make that weekend for that work thing, so they then throw another 10 weekends at you, just saying, you know what, like, weekends are really important family time to me. So do you have a weekday when you'd be up for doing this? Or actually, I can't do that. So it's just holding space for the values that you have.
And you're so good at this, though. Because I've definitely...
Better than I was.
I think you're so good. There's definitely... You said to me before, I've actually got too much on at the moment. I'm needing to... I don't know how you've said it, but like pull back, or I can't. I won't. I can't. And actually, it's inspiring. Because you're like, wow. Like, but well done you for recognizing what you need.
Burnout is such a teacher, because I think when you go through burnout, when you're so high functioning and then you cannot function, you think, oh my gosh, there's a real tangible cost to this.
Yeah.
I could not work. I could not show up. I could not show up for my kids. I could not show up for my family. I could not show up. So, I think when you start recognizing the cost of actually saying yes to things that you don't have capacity for, or you need rest, or you need to focus in actually on some of those things that really align with your values, it's not easy, but you start being able to live more fully. And your yeses become so much more wholehearted. Like my yes to this is like, yes, I can't wait. I'm so excited.
I know. I was like, she definitely wants to be here.
It's a wholehearted yes. And I think you can do more wholehearted yeses when you are honouring, you know, and I think sometimes relationships work, there is a level of sacrifice. Sometimes we have to push beyond. Sometimes we have to do things that maybe we think, oh my gosh, I really don't have capacity for. And in those cases, I say, okay, so you need to do this thing, or you need to go and be with this person, even if actually there might be that might be tricky. How can you then recoup some resource?
Yes,
so where might you get some, where might you kind of really factor in more rest? Like if I have a really busy work day, I'm then thinking, right, I need a more home-based day the next day, you know, for the sake of my capacity. So
there's a balance.
It's a balance, and we have to get to know ourselves to know where that balance is.
But I love that you're talking about this, because I think the thing that you can get confused with boundaries is, and something I've found hard to understand at times, is where's it not being selfish? Where's it just being like, well, this is what I want? Because and I think the key word for what I'm hearing is flexibility. Is there has to be flexibility on something. Some things there won't, but some things, like you say, we can't just go through life not doing everything we don't want to do. It's funny, I won't say who, because they'll definitely be watching, but very close someone in my life has been exerting boundaries recently, but to the detriment of basically I don't think they have quite worked out yet that like flexibility is important. So it's become just really hard to plan anything with this person, really hard to kind of do anything, because they're just but it's come from a place of probably then they're just having to like really, it's like they've kind of a kid that's gone, right, I'm not doing it at all, you know, putting their heels in. But I guess they'll get there. But I think the key word is having that flexibility.
Absolutely.
Having that. And also just like having grace for others as well, right? And like lowering our expectations of other people. And anyway, that's probably another
I think so.
topic.
I think it is, sometimes it is like we go so far the other way out of like, I can't do this anymore, so I'm going to have to start holding. And it's a learning. It's a learning. Absolutely. It's a learning.
So anyone that might be facing burnout right now, what would you want to say to them, and how do you recover?
I'd want to say that there will definitely be things that aren't sustainable about the way you've been living and giving, you know, and just think about what can you pull back on? What can you, and it might be those internal things like the people pleasing and the perfectionism. I'm a big fan of cutting corners as a very valid form of self-care. You know, I stood in the kitchen yesterday and I was like, and I like making dinner, right? I make dinner early in the day so that it's all ready for when the kids get back. And I stood in the kitchen, I was like, I don't want to make dinner. I do not want to make dinner. And instead of saying to myself, for goodness sake, Anna, just crack on and get it done, right? You have to have dinner. I thought, right, okay, I'm obviously just tired. And I'm obviously just a bit sick of the routine and the mundaneness. What can I do just to take some of that pressure off myself? So I shoved a load of veg in and blitzed it all up. Bought some eggs and I was like, right, mate, omelette. You know, and it was fine. And actually it was easy. But instead of, sometimes it's recognizing where is that resistance in yourself, where there's a little voice inside going like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't have it in me. And it's thinking, okay, instead of just steamrolling through that, even if it's something I have to do, what can I do to soften that for myself? What can I do to relieve some of the pressure? Maybe you're just thinking, how can I remove the perfectionism out of this? Or how can I remove that pressure because I always do it like this, I must always do it like that? Well, actually, what if today I just recognise that I'm just a bit frazzled? How can I make the path smooth for myself? So I think it's just starting to listen in. And when you feel that resistance or that resentment's a real, you know, it's a real flag when it comes to boundaries and burnout. You know, if you're doing things resentfully, often you're doing it out of a place where you're not kind of resourced. So either it's about planning in that rest before or after, or recognizing what needs to be met, or just actually thinking maybe I'm adding a load of perfectionism, or I'm, you know, or something, or I've just taken on too much and I need to reassess that. So, you know, and recognizing that burnout happens over time, not overnight. It might feel like we wake up one day and we're like, I can't. But actually, it's starting to notice what are those little signals and signs in yourself. So for me, one of them is getting a message from someone that I love my mum saying, oh, you're up for a chat later, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's another thing to do. Why does everyone want something from me? And it's this sudden sense that actually those meaningful things in my life, I just suddenly start feeling resistant to them because I'm spending too much. I need to pull back, and it's valuing rest, and it's seeing it as rest is recovery from things that we have journeyed through, and it is a way to restore our energy levels for what we're going to give out. So it's really starting to respect rest. Like burnout will have you respecting rest in a very hard way, but if you want to avoid going into that place, then thinking, right, I need to start respecting my need for rest and being supported, and my need for support and my need for feeling seen. Where might that not be being met?
Wow. It's so much there. I love that you said, how do I make the road smooth in front of me? I think that's such a beautiful phrase, just to like, I'm going to take that away with me and just think about that like every day. But the thing about rest as well is, it, again, we live in a society that doesn't particularly value rest. But I was just thinking, athletes, and I'm going to get the stat wrong, but I think they spend like 90% of the time in recovery.
Yes.
Like, they're in the ice bath, they've got the physios. We kind of sometimes need to think about ourselves like that as well. 100%. But we kind of just think that we've got this never ending amount of energy, and until, like you say, you hit burnout, and then you realize you really don't. And I know it's the classic analogy, but cars need fuel. We need to refuel. Okay, your final, what's it like?
Okay.
What's it like to be raising children whilst also reparenting yourself?
Yeah, it's the biggest responsibility. So what I mean by reparenting yourself is recognizing, just as we were talking about, how can I make the road smooth myself? For me, that's about mothering myself, right? It's about doing that. And I think the challenge is a lot of people may not have been parented in a way that they are trying to parent themselves. We recognize that we don't necessarily want to parent our kids in a way that we were parented, right? But I think as we start trying to respond differently, we recognize that we are responding to ourselves in a way that we are wanting to do quite the opposite to our kids. So if what is in us comes out of us.
Okay.
Right. So if I'm wanting to be really calm and connected with my kids, but I'm bullying myself from the inside, and I'm very harshly critical, and I'm jumping down my own throat at everything, and I'm beating myself up for everything, then what is going to come out of me is not what I want to. Under stress, right? Okay. Under stress, stuff just comes out. We can be reactive. And actually, what I learned is that if I want to foster and nurture like connection and a sense of safety in my kids, I have to do that for myself. And a really good little illustration of this is, my harsh inner critic. I'm ADHD. I am dropping things left, right, and centre. I'm bumping into things left, right, and centre. Stuff's tumbling down. I'm smashing stuff as I'm cooking, And, I used to be so critical and frustrated with myself. For goodness sake, Anna, why can't you just do this? I dropped something and be like, oh, just angry with me. And then the kids would do the same. And I'd be like, oh, don't worry. Inside I'm like, oh, you just made more work for me. And I started just really intentionally being just kinder to myself, right? This is the way that I am. I'm always going to get lost, despite Google Maps, you could tell me where to go and I will not end up where I should be. And that's just, it's about accepting, again, like my rough edges and my unfinished state. And the more compassion and grace I have found for myself, the more that is what is coming out of me, right? So I drop something in the kitchen on the regular. The kids will hear me say, oh dear, these things
that's
happen.
Beautiful.
And that is what is coming out of me, because I'm not bullying myself from the inside out anymore. Right. So my daughter.
It is almost funny though, isn't it? Because it's just like, we always do it. And I don't think my dad will mind us saying this, but he is like this in like cartoon way. Like he'll be like, idiot. Like, oh my gosh, Dad, it's not that bad. Don't be so harsh on yourself.
Don't be so mean to you.
But then you do see like, oh my gosh, we are our own worst critics, aren't we? But then it's just hilarious when, when everyone says, oh, your inner script is the worst. Sometimes I think my outer script is also quite bad.
It's also bad, but that's just an idea of what's going on inside. And I think as we start softening that and we start thinking, if I dare to believe that my kids are worthy of love and patience and kindness and connection, I have the same value. So therefore, you know, and I think so much of perfectionism and stress is that tension in ourselves because we're so scared of being in trouble with ourselves.
Right.
You know, I want to do everything well because the cost of not doing so is this absolute monologue of criticism internally, let alone what anyone else might say. So when my daughter dropped like a cup of milk on a rug like this, a furry rug, right, the other day, and she was like, oh dear. And I was there thinking, oh dear indeed, that rug is gonna stink. Like, I don't even know what to do with it. And I just love that. That's what came out of her. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is working. What I'm doing in reparenting myself is coming out of me in moments of stress, not all the time. Don't get me wrong. Like, please, I'm in no way perfect at all. My kids will at some point need therapy, and you know they will probably talk about me, and I'm just trying to make sure that it's, you know, not too expensive for them. You know, we will mess up our kids, we hurt each other, we get it wrong, we say the wrong things. Like I react, and I apologize and I take responsibility. And I think that's the important thing, is that, you know, if we want to be gentle, we have to be gentle with ourselves, because under pressure, what's in comes out, no matter how much we love someone.
Yeah, and that must be the same, not just for our parenting, but friendships, relationships, romantic relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the other areas? Because I kind of feel like you're like a motherhood expert, so I feel like we should be like just getting all the gold. Like, what are some of the other areas that kind of applies as well? Like, obviously being gentle, but I guess for parenting, for raising children, what would be your encouragement advice to parents?
Right, yeah. Yesterday, my 8-year-old, he said to me, Mummy, I want to get you a maid. And I was like, why? And he's like, to do all the cooking and the cleaning. I was like, but I don't mind doing those things. He was like, yeah, but then you could sit on the sofa with us. And I was like, oh, you know, I think sometimes we love in doing. We do. We're like, everything is clean and tidy. And it's, you know, I get a lot of joy out of tidiness. But actually, you know, I'm there loving my kids vacuuming the floor. I'm like, I'm loving you. Look at this tidy floor. And they're there on the sofa. You know, these little kids on the sofa in their PJs. The literal dream. Like, this was a dream that I'm actually living. You know, what an immense privilege. And I'm loving them with the Hoover. And all they want is just for me to go and sit and watch whatever it is they're watching with them. So I think sometimes it's remembering that, you know, we love in so many different ways, but actually that presence is so important. And it doesn't mean you have to be present all the time with your kids. Stuff needs to get done. But actually sometimes I'm thinking, right, I'm loving you with the Hoover right now, but the way that you really feel loved, if I just back away and just go and sit with you for 5 minutes. It's just the being with. It's just being with each other and not feeling like we have to do anything. And actually, that is so often where the feeling loved is, you know?
Yeah. Someone sitting with you.
Yeah. So sometimes just stopping and really looking at what you have and the real gift and immense privilege of that, and thinking, how can I be there a little bit more?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Anna, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
I think it's just that sense of, you know, you are enough. When you start to realise that you're never going to be good enough for anyone and everything else, you just cannot. So, and in that is where you find that real sense of enoughness. Yeah.
So beautiful. I'm so honoured to have you in front of me.
It's been
you
wonderful.
Just are incredible, and I think similar for like quite a few like my friends and guests that we have on here. It's people, you've done the hard work, and you didn't have to share it with the world, but you have, and I have so much respect for that, because it's brave and it's courageous, and you could just be like, you know, holding all that goodness
Keeps me accountable. Because I need to be reminded this stuff all the time. These are very opposing messages to what is coming in constantly, like a tidal wave from the world. You know, you're only enough at this if you look like that. And we need, you know, selfishly in my job, I get to say these things out over and over again and hear them over and over again, because I need it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of like generous and selfish at the same time.
And there's something in there as well about the intentionality, the repeating, just remembering to like just switch those things on. Am I being present? Am I being here? Am I we like to give every guest an opportunity on the podcast to recognize someone in your life, whoever comes to mind.
Okay. I think so. I would love to recognize my mum. Yeah, I think about her a lot at the moment. She's incredible, and she's a real giver, and she has such wisdom. And I think she is someone who could do with allowing other people just to really love her as much as she loves other people.
Wow.
And she's very loved. But I think sometimes just allow yourself to like really absorb some of that and just feel supported and loved. She's amazing.
What's her name?
Alison.
Ali,
yeah.
You've been recognised. Yeah. Love that. Anna, thank you so much again for being here. Honestly, I can't wait for everyone to listen. You are just a total delight. We love you lots.
Thank you. Well, I love your heart and I love everything that you do and the absolute passion and love and compassion and heart that every little item that you put out into the world, every bit of writing, every piece of jewellery is just so imbued with that. What a gift.
Thanks, my friend. Thank you for joining us for the Recognise What's It Like podcast. We hope this chat has brought you hope and connection, has left you feeling inspired, and above all, has made you feel seen, valued, and recognised to the core. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.